Chapter 1. The letters in blue. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Slipped beneath Lara's apartment door like a secret meant to suffocate. She found it when she returned from the library. Her arms heavy with books she couldn't afford and research she'd never finish. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, sealed with black wax that bore no crest. Her name was written across the front in elegant script, too elegant, as though the writer had all the time in the world to perfect each curve and flourish. Lara set down her books and stared at it. No return address, no postmark, just her name, floating on paper that smelled faintly of roses and something else. Something metallic. She opened it, standing in her doorway, one hand still gripping her keys. You should have stayed hidden. That was all it said. 7 words in that same beautiful, inhuman handwriting. Lara's fingers went cold. She turned the paper over, nothing. She checked the envelope again, empty. Her gaze swept the dim hallway outside her door, but the building was silent except for the hum of old pipes and the distant murmur of a television through thin walls. She told herself it was a prank, a wrong address, a mistake. The second letter arrived 3 days later. This one was pushed through the mail slot while she showered. She heard the soft scrape of paper on wood and rushed out, hair dripping, wrapped in a towel that suddenly felt like no protection at all. The envelope lay on her doormat like an accusation. Same cream paper, same black wax, same perfect handwriting. They know where you work. Lara's breath caught. Her hands shook as she tore it open, searching for more, an explanation, a threat, a name, but there was nothing else. Just those 5 words that turned her small, quiet life into a trap. She checked the locks. All secure. She peered through the peephole into the empty hallway. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But someone had been there. Someone who knew her name, her address, her schedule. The third letter came on Sunday. Lara had spent the week looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, avoiding the library and taking different routes home. She'd considered going to the police. But what would she say? Someone's sending me cryptic notes? They'd tell her to call back when there was an actual threat. This envelope was different. It was hand-delivered while she was home. She'd been curled on her threadbare couch, pretending to read, when she heard it, a soft thud against her door, like someone had placed something there with care. She froze, book forgotten, pulse hammering in her throat, silence stretched. No footsteps, no retreat. Lara stood slowly, her bare feet, silent on the worn carpet. She crept to the door and pressed her ear against it, listening. Nothing. She checked the peephole, empty hallway, flickering fluorescent light. The same water-stained walls she saw every day. But when she opened the door, the envelope was there. This time, the wax seal was broken. This time, the letter inside was stained with something dark that had dried into the paper fibers, turning the cream to rust. He's coming for you tonight. Blood. The metallic smell she'd noticed before was blood. Lara's hands went numb. The letter slipped from her fingers and drifted to the floor. She stumbled back into her apartment, slammed the door, threw the deadbolt, fastened the chain. Her breathing came in short, sharp gasps that fogged the small space. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands. Dialed 911. Waited. This is 911. What's your emergency? Someone. Lara's voice cracked. Someone's been sending me threatening letters. They know where I live. There, ma'am. Are you in immediate danger? I don't know. They said someone's coming tonight. Is anyone in your home with you now? No. But are your doors and windows locked? Yes. I'm sending an officer to your location. Stay inside, keep your doors locked, and call back immediately if anyone attempts to enter. The line went dead before Lara could respond. She backed away from the door, phone clutched in one hand, and waited. Minutes crawled past. 10, 15, 20. No sirens, no knock, no help. Then the lights went out. Not just in her apartment, the entire building plunged into darkness so complete that Lara couldn't see her own hands. She stood frozen in her living room, heart slamming against her ribs, every childhood fear of the dark rising up to swallow her whole. Something moved outside her door. Not footsteps, not the shuffle of a neighbor or the creak of old wood settling. This was deliberate, patient, the soft whisper of fabric against the hallway carpet. Coming closer. Lara pressed her back against the wall, phone screen casting a weak glow that seemed to make the darkness around her even deeper. She could hear her own breathing, too loud, too fast. The thing outside her door stopped. Silence. Then, so softly she almost didn't hear it, Lara, Her name, spoken in a voice like smoke and shadows, wrapped in an accent she couldn't place. Old, foreign, wrong. I know you're frightened. The voice was male, each word carefully measured. But you need to open the store, now. Go away. Her voice cracked on the words. The one hunting you will be here soon. You have two choices. Die alone in that apartment, or live long enough to understand why you were never supposed to exist. Alara's throat closed. Who are you? Someone who's been looking for you longer than you've been alive. Someone who found those letters before their sender found you. That's not an answer. A pause. Then, open the door, Alara, or I'll be attending your funeral by dawn. Her hands trembled on the deadbolt. Every instinct screamed at her to stay inside, stay hidden, stay safe behind her thin door and cheaper locks. But safe was a lie. She'd been living for months. Safe was the fantasy she'd built after fleeing a life that had tried to destroy her. Safe was an illusion that shattered the moment. That first letter arrived, and something in that voice, cold and certain, and absolutely convinced, told her that dying alone in the dark would be worse than whatever waited on the other side. Alara unlatched the chain, turned the deadbolt, opened the door. The hallway was empty except for shadows and a man dressed in black who looked like he'd walked out of a nightmare dressed as a dream. Chapter 2. The stranger in the dark was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, elegant, cold, and absolutely deadly. Alara's breath caught as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. The man stood just beyond her threshold, tall and still, his face half shadowed by the flickering emergency light at the end of the hall. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, his eyes were the color of winter ice, pale and piercing, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to step back and lean forward at the same time. He wore all black, expensive black, the kind of tailored clothing that didn't belong in her neighborhood, in her building, in her world. His coat hung open over a shirt and vest that suggested old money and older tastes, and his hands, pale, long-fingered, marked with what looked like silver rings, were empty and held carefully at his sides. You opened it, he said. And there was something in his voice that might have been approval or surprise. Smart girl. Don't call me that. Alara kept one hand on the doorframe, ready to slam it shut. Who are you? Someone who's been tracking a very dangerous creature across 3 countries and to centuries. Someone who intercepted the letters that creature sent you. He tilted his head, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Someone who needs you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say, because we have approximately 4 minutes before this building becomes a killing ground. Alara's pulse hammered in her ears. You're insane. No, I'm ancient, irritated. And currently the only thing standing between you and a death that would make those letters look merciful. He stepped forward, not crossing her threshold, but close enough that she could see the sharp lines of his face, the unnatural stillness of his posture. My name is Cashin Thorne. I am what your storybooks call a vampire, and the one hunting you is something far worse than me. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Vampire. Alara laughed, a sharp, desperate sound that echoed in the empty hallway. You're insane, she repeated, but her voice shook. You smelled the blood on that last letter. His voice was patient, relentless. You felt the wrongness in those words, the weight of something that shouldn't exist. You've been running from your own past for 6 months, hiding in this forgotten corner of the city, and you thought you'd escaped. But you can't escape what's in your blood. Alara, you can only choose who helps you survive it. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He took another step closer, and Alara saw something flicker across his face. Urgency. Your grandmother was Marian Ashford. She was supposed to have died without children, without bloodline, without you. His pale eyes locked on hers. But she didn't, and now the House of Corvus knows you exist, and they've sent their best hunter to erase the mistake she made by living long enough to pass on her blood. Alara's mouth went dry. Her grandmother. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Not since the funeral, when she was 17. Not since her mother had burned every photograph and record and memory she could find. How do you know? 3 minutes, Cashin interrupted. We can discuss genealogy later. Preferably somewhere that isn't about to become a crime scene. Right now, you need to decide, do you trust me enough to live? Or do you trust your locked door enough to die? As if in answer, the emergency light at the end of the hall flickered once and went out. The darkness was total now, absolute, broken only by the faint glow of Alara's phone screen. But she could still see him, Cashin Thorne, the vampire. The stranger who knew her dead grandmother's name, and his eyes reflected the light like an animal's. "That's not possible," she whispered. "It shouldn't be. I'm using a considerable amount of power to let you see me at all." His voice dropped lower, urgent. "Elara, please." The word please, spoken in that ancient, elegant voice, was what decided her. Elara grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door, shoved her feet into her boots, and snatched her phone and keys. "If you're lying, then you can stake me yourself. I'll even provide the weapon." Cashin moved aside as she stepped into the hall, pulling the door shut behind her. "But right now, we run." He took her hand, his skin was cold, impossibly cold, and pulled her down the hallway toward the back stairwell. Elara stumbled after him, her mind spinning, her body moving on pure adrenaline and terror. "What about the police?" she gasped as they hit the stairs. "I called. They'll find an empty apartment and no evidence of forced entry. Memory is malleable for most humans when we need it to be." He moved faster than she could follow, practically carrying her down the flights of stairs. "The one hunting you won't be so subtle." "What does that mean?" "It means Adrian Corvus doesn't leave witnesses." They burst through the emergency exit into the alley behind her building. The night air was cold and damp, thick with the smell of garbage and rain. Cashin released her hand and turned, his coat billowing around him like wings, his entire body coiled and ready. "Stay behind me," he said. "Don't run. Don't scream. Don't draw attention." What? The emergency door behind them exploded outward. Not open. Exploded. The metal shrieked and bent, torn from its hinges by something that moved too fast to see clearly. Elara caught a glimpse of pale skin, dark eyes, a smile full of too many teeth. Cashin moved. He was a blur of black and silver, intercepting the creature before it could reach her. The impact of their collision cracked the brick wall, and suddenly the alley was full of violence, movements too fast to track, sounds that weren't quite human. The wet snap of something breaking. Elara pressed her back against the opposite wall, frozen, watching as the two figures fought with a speed and brutality that belonged in nightmares. Then Cashin's voice cut through the chaos. "Run." This time, Elara ran. Chapter 3. Sanctuary in Shadows. Elara ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out beneath her. She didn't know where she was going. The streets blurred together, narrow alleys, empty parking lots, the skeletal remains of abandoned buildings that crowded this forgotten corner of the city. Her boots slapped against wet pavement, echoing off brick walls, and behind her, somewhere in the darkness, she could still hear the sounds of that inhuman fight. Then silence, complete, suffocating silence that was somehow worse than the violence. Elara slowed, gasping, and pressed herself into the shadows of a recessed doorway. Her heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She fumbled for her phone. The screen was shattered, spider-webbed from when she'd clutched it too hard, but it still glowed weakly. And no signal. Of course there was no signal. You run well for someone who doesn't exercise. Elara spun, a scream caught in her throat. Cashin stood 3 feet away, perfectly still, not even breathing hard. His coat was torn at the shoulder, and there was something dark blood, she realized with nauseating certainty, splattered across his jaw and neck. But he was whole, alive. Whatever he'd fought, he'd won. "You said to run," Elara managed, her voice shaking. "I did. And you listened. That's twice you've made the smart choice tonight." He moved closer slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so." Her hands trembled. "What was that thing?" "Adrian Corvus. One of the oldest hunters in the vampire world, and considerably more vicious than most." Cashin's expression was grim. "He's been tracking your bloodline for decades. Tonight was supposed to be the end of it. You keep saying that. My bloodline. I don't understand. Not here." Cashin glanced over his shoulder, his entire body tense with awareness. "He's wounded, but not dead, and he'll have reinforcements before dawn. We need to get off the streets. Where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere his house can't easily breach." He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a command. "Trust me a little longer, Elara. Please." That word again, please, from a creature who looked like he'd never asked for anything in his life. Elara took his hand, his fingers closed around hers, cold and strong. And then they were moving again, but differently this time. Not running, walking, swift and purposeful, through streets that seemed to empty before them. Twice, Elara caught glimpses of other people, late-night workers, homeless, bundled in doorways, but their eyes slid past Cashin as if he didn't exist. "They can't see you," she whispered. "They see what I allow them to see." A trick of the old blood. His voice was matter of fact. It takes concentration, which is why I couldn't maintain it during the fight. But it will keep us hidden for now. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The neighborhood changed around them, less decay, more gentrification, old brownstones restored to their Victorian glory. Cashin led her to one that stood slightly apart from the others. 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows. Surrounded by an iron fence that looked older than the building itself, he touched the gate and it swung open silently. "You live here?" Elara asked, as they climbed the front steps. "I own it." Living is a generous term for what I do. Cashin produced an old-fashioned key and unlocked the heavy wooden door. "Welcome to my sanctuary. The wards here are older than this city, bound in blood and iron. Nothing from the House of Corvus can cross this threshold uninvited." The interior was exactly what Elara expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Dark wood panels lined the walls. Bookshelves stretched toward high ceilings. Antique furniture, all deep burgundy and black leather, filled the space with a weight that suggested centuries rather than decades. But there was also modern lighting, carefully placed to illuminate artwork that looked priceless. And the faint hum of central heating that took the edge off the November cold. It felt lived in, inhabited, real. "Sit," Cashin said, gesturing to a sofa near the fireplace, which ignited with a gesture of his hand actual flames, no gas or electricity. "You're in shock. You need warmth." Elara sank onto the sofa, her body finally giving into the exhaustion and terror of the last hour. She watched as Cashin shrugged out of his torn coat, revealing the damage beneath. His shirt was shredded across one shoulder, but the skin underneath was already healed, smooth and unmarked. "You're not bleeding," she said numbly. "Not anymore. We heal quickly. It's one of the few advantages of this existence." He moved to a sideboard and poured something amber into a crystal glass. "Drink this. It's brandy. Very old, and purely human. I promise." Elara took the glass with shaking hands and sipped. The liquor burned down her throat, sharp and grounding. "I don't understand any of this." "I know." Cashin sat in the chair across from her, close enough to speak quietly, but far enough to not crowd her. "Let me start with what you need to know to survive the next few days. Then we can discuss the rest." "Okay." Elara's voice was small. "Your grandmother, Marianne Ashford, was human. But your great-grandmother was not. She was a vampire who broke our oldest law. She bore a living child through means I won't detail tonight. That child carried diluted vampire blood, just enough to pass on certain traits. Your grandmother had them. Your mother had them. And you have them." "What traits?" "You can see us when we don't wish to be seen. You can enter places warded against humans. You smell different to us. You smell like possibility, like a bridge between 2 worlds that should never touch." His pale eyes held hers. "And to the House of Corvus, which has spent 2 centuries trying to erase your family line, you smell like a threat that must be eliminated." Elara set down the glass before she dropped it. "Why?" "Because if the vampire world learns that one of their own successfully bred with a human, it destroys the foundation of everything we've built. Our laws, our hierarchy. Our entire existence is based on the belief that we are separate from humanity, above it, beyond it, untouched by it. Your bloodline proves that's a lie." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. "So what happens now?" Elara finally asked. Cashin leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold control in his expression. Something that might have been weariness or regret. "Now," he said quietly, "we figure out how to keep you alive." Chapter 4. The weight of truth. Elara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and the momentary, blessed confusion of not remembering where she was. Then it all came back: the letters, the attack, the vampire who'd saved her life and brought her to his home that smelled of old books and older secrets. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The bedroom was elegant and spare, a 4-poster bed with dark curtains she didn't remember closing, a wardrobe that looked like it belonged in a museum, and a door that led to what appeared to be a private bathroom. Someone, Cashin, she assumed, had left fresh towels on the dresser and a glass of water on the nightstand. The water was cold, as if it had been placed there only moments ago. Elara drank it in 3 swallows, then padded to the bathroom. Her reflection in the mirror looked haunted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair tangled, her clothes rumpled from sleeping in them. She splashed water on her face and tried to organize her thoughts into something coherent. Vampires were real. Her bloodline was dangerous. Someone named Adrian Corvus wanted her dead, and Cashin Thorn ancient deadly. Impossibly beautiful was apparently the only thing standing between her and extinction. She found him in what he called the library. Though library was a vast understatement for the two-story room filled with books and languages she didn't recognize. He sat in a leather chair near the window, reading something that looked hand-illuminated. And the afternoon sun, streaming through the glass, stopped precisely 6 inches from where he sat, as if it knew better than to touch him. "You're awake," he said, without looking up. "There's coffee in the kitchen. Human coffee. Human food. I keep both for guests, though I rarely have them. What time is it?" "Nearly 3. You slept for 11 hours. He closed the book carefully. "Your body needed it. Fear is exhausting." Alar moved closer, staying in the sunlight as if it offered protection. "Why doesn't the sun hurt you?" "It doesn't hurt me. It's simply uncomfortable. Like standing too close to a fire." He gestured to the shadow where he sat. "I can tolerate it for short periods, but I prefer not to. Hence the wards on the windows that filter the worst of it. And you don't sleep in a coffin. I sleep in a bed, when I sleep at all. Most of what your folklore says about us is exaggeration or metaphor, translated to literally." A faint smile touched his mouth. "We're monsters, Alara, but we're not ridiculous." She should have been afraid of him. She was afraid of him. But in the daylight, in this beautiful room that smelled like paper and leather, he seemed less like a nightmare and more like a very old, very tired man who'd seen too much. "Tell me about my grandmother," she said quietly. Cashin's expression shifted. Something guarded, sliding behind his eyes. "What do you remember about her?" "Not much. She died when I was 17. My mother never spoke about her. They were estranged, I think. But I remember visiting her once, when I was little." Alara wrapped her arms around herself. "She lived in an old house upstate. It was full of strange things. Mirrors covered with cloth, jars of salt by every door. She made me promise never to go out after dark. She was protecting you, teaching you the old ways, even if you didn't understand them then." Cashin stood, moving with that inhuman grace to a bookshelf. He pulled down a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Marianne Ashford came to me 30 years ago. She'd discovered the truth about her own mother, what she was, what it meant. She was terrified, but she was also brave. She asked me to watch over her bloodline if anything happened to her, and you agreed? Just like that?" "Not just like that, no." He handed her the journal. "I agreed because Marianne was dying, and she convinced me that her granddaughter you would need protection someday. She was right." Alara opened the journal carefully. The handwriting inside was elegant, feminine, achingly familiar. Her grandmother's words preserved across decades. "If you're reading this, then Cashin has kept his promise. I'm sorry, my darling girl. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you. Simply by existing, by loving your grandfather, by wanting a normal life, I thought I could hide what we were. I thought the old houses would forget. I was wrong." Alara's throat tightened. She flipped through pages of careful notes. Vampire houses, their territories, their laws, blood oaths and binding contracts, ways to identify them, ways to protect herself. A desperate manual for surviving a world her grandmother had never wanted her to enter. "She knew they'd come for me eventually." Alara whispered. "She knew the House of Corvus would never stop hunting your line. They consider you an abomination, proof that vampire blood can be diluted, passed on, made human again. It terrifies them." Cashin moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. "But Marianne also believed you deserved to live, to choose. That's why she made me promise to protect you, not to make decisions for you." "What decisions?" "Whether to hide or fight. Whether to learn our world or run from it. Whether to let me help you or face this alone." His pale eyes met hers. "I won't force you to stay here, Alara. But if you leave, Adrian will find you within days. And next time, I might not arrive in time." The weight of it settled over her like a shroud, the impossible choice between a life she'd never asked for and a death she couldn't escape. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Really?" Cashin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "Because 30 years ago, a dying woman asked me to remember what it meant to care about something other than survival. Because I made a promise, and I'm old enough to understand that promises are the only things that make immortality bearable." He paused. "And because when I look at you, I see someone who deserves better than to be erased for the crime of existing. Something in Alar's chest cracked open, not breaking, but unfurling. The careful walls she'd built around herself, after everything that had driven her into hiding, into this small, quiet life. I want to fight, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I want to understand this world. I want to stop running. Cashin studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we have work to do. The House of Corvus won't wait, and you have a great deal to learn. Where do we start? With the truth. All of it. He gestured to the books surrounding them. Welcome to Vampire Law 101, Alara Ashford. Try not to get expelled. The consequences are rather permanent. Chapter 5. Blood and Boundary. As the education began at dusk, Cashin led Alara down to what he called the archive, a climate-controlled room beneath the brownstone that housed centuries of vampire history. The walls were lined with documents and protective cases, maps that showed territories marked in different colors, and photographs that shouldn't have existed but did. Vampires captured on film, their faces sharp and ageless. The vampire world is built on 3 pillars, Cashin began, his voice taking on the cadence of a lecturer. Blood, consent, and house law. Break any of these, and you forfeit your existence. Alara stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. Explain blood first. Blood is sustenance, but it's also currency, contract, and connection. He pulled down a leather-bound tome and opened it to a page covered in cramped script. When we feed, we take energy as much as blood. It's why we can survive on small amounts. We don't need volume. We need vitality. But feeding creates a bond, temporary but real. We can feel the donor's emotions, their memories, their essence. That sounds invasive. It is. Which is why consent is sacred. Cashin's expression was grave. We cannot feed from an unwilling human. Not because we're physically unable to, we certainly can, but because our laws forbid it absolutely. Force feeding is punishable by execution. No exceptions, no appeals. It's the one crime every house agrees deserves immediate death. Alara thought of the movies, the books, the countless stories of vampires as predators who hunted and killed without consequence. Why? If you're stronger, faster, because we remember being human. Because most of us were turned against our will, and we know what it means to have your body used as someone else's resource. His voice hardened. And because the moment we become mindless predators is the moment we stop being anything worth preserving. Consent keeps us civilized. It keeps us from becoming the monsters your folklore claims we are. She absorbed this, filing it away with everything else that was rewriting her understanding of the world. And house law? That's where it gets complicated. Cashin moved to one of the maps, a detailed rendering of the northeastern United States, divided into territories marked with different symbols. The vampire world is organized into houses, ancient bloodlines, each ruling their own territory. The House of Thorn, my house, controls this city and the surrounding regions. We're relatively young by vampire standards, only 4 centuries old, but we're strong and we honor the old ways. And the House of Corvus? One of the oldest, possibly the oldest, though they've never confirmed their true age. They control most of New England, and they're traditionalists, purists who believe vampire blood should remain undiluted, untainted by humanity. He pointed to a section of the map marked in crimson. Adrian Corvus is the house heir. When he hunts, he doesn't stop until his target is eliminated. Alar's stomach churned. How do I fight something that old and that determined? You don't. Not directly. Cashin closed the book and met her eyes. But you can survive him, which is almost the same thing. You learn the rules he has to follow, the boundaries even he can't cross, and you use them to stay alive long enough to find leverage. What kind of leverage? That's what we need to discover. Every house has secrets, vulnerabilities they guard viciously. If we can find Corvus's weak point, we can negotiate a truce or at least make you too expensive to kill. He paused. But first, you need to understand what you are, what your blood makes you capable of. Alara blinked. I thought I was just human with vampire ancestry. You're more than that. The blood doesn't just mark you, it gives you abilities most humans don't have. Cashin moved closer, his pale eyes intense. You can see through our glamours. You already proved that last night. You can enter warded spaces that should repel humans. And if your grandmother's notes are accurate, you can resist compulsion. Compulsion? The ability we have to influence human thoughts and actions. It's subtle, not mind control, but it can make humans agreeable, forgetful, compliant. He tilted his head. May I test it? I promise it won't hurt, and you can tell me to stop at any time. Alara's instinct was to refuse, but she'd asked for this. She'd asked to learn, to understand, to stop being helpless. Okay. Cashin stepped closer, near enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the only sign of the human he'd once been. His voice dropped to something softer, almost musical. You're tired, Alara. You want to sit down. You should sit down. It would feel good to rest. She felt it, a gentle pressure against her thoughts, like a hand on her shoulder guiding her toward a chair. It would be easy to give in, to let the exhaustion win, to just sit down like he suggested. But underneath the pressure was her own will, solid and stubborn. She met his eyes and stayed standing. No, Cashin's expression shifted, surprise, then something that might have been pride. Impressive. Most humans can't resist even a mild compulsion, especially not from someone as old as I am. Your blood is stronger than I thought. Is that good or bad? Both. It means you have natural defenses, which will help you survive. But it also means the House of Corvus will see you as an even greater threat. They can't control you the way they control other humans. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the climate-controlled air. So what do I do? How do I learn to use this? Practice. Training. Time we probably don't have. Cashin moved to a cabinet and withdrew something wrapped in dark cloth. When he unfolded it, she saw a knife-silver blade, ivory handle, covered in symbols she didn't recognize. But we start with the basics. This is iron and silver, the only materials that can truly harm us. If Adrian comes for you again, you need to know how to use it. He held it out, handle first. Alara took the knife, feeling its weight, its purpose. It was heavier than she expected, solid and real in a way that made everything else feel suddenly, terrifyingly concrete. I don't know how to fight, she said quietly. Then I'll teach you. Cashin's voice was steady, certain. You have 3 advantages, Alara. Your blood, your will, and me. We're going to make that enough. She looked down at the blade, then up, at the vampire who'd promised to protect her, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. When do we start? Now. Chapter 6. The Hunter's Masagathi training room was in the basement, past the archive. Behind a door that required Cashin's blood to open, Alara watched as he pressed his palm against a symbol carved into the wood, something ancient that glowed briefly red before the lock disengaged. The room beyond was surprisingly modern. Padded mats covered the floor. Weapons lined the walls in careful arrangements, and mirrors reflected everything back at angles that made the space seem larger than it was. This is where I practice, Cashin said, shrugging out of his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. Where I remember what it means to move, to fight, to survive when diplomacy fails. Alara set down the silver knife on a nearby table, her palms already sweating. I should tell you I've never been in a real fight. I took a self-defense class in college, but that was years ago, and I barely remember. Stop. Cashin's voice was gentle but firm. Don't apologize for what you haven't learned yet. We all start somewhere. Even vampires. Even you? Especially me. I was turned at 23, in 1623, during a battle I had no business surviving. I was a scholar, Alara. I'd spent my life with books, not blades. Learning to fight as an immortal was. He paused, something distant crossing his face. Humbling. It was the first truly personal thing he'd shared, and it shifted something in her perception of him. Not just an ancient vampire, but a person who'd been frightened once. Who'd had to learn. What do we start with? She asked. Awareness. Most humans telegraph their movements. They announce what they're about to do with their eyes, their shoulders, their breathing. Vampires do too, but faster, subtler. You need to learn to see the signs. He moved to the center of the mat. Attack me. Alara blinked. What? Try to hit me. Anywhere, however you want. He stood relaxed, hands at his sides. Don't think about it. Just do it. She hesitated, feeling foolish, then lunged forward and swung at his shoulder. Cashin wasn't there. He'd moved not quickly enough that she couldn't see it, but fluidly, stepping aside so her momentum carried her past him. She stumbled, caught herself. Again, he said. She tried. Again and again, she tried punching, grabbing, even attempting a clumsy kick. Each time, Cashin moved just enough to avoid her, his expression patient and evaluating. Never mocking, never frustrated. You're relying on force, he said after her 10th attempt. You're trying to overpower me, which won't work. I'm stronger, faster, and I've had 400 years to perfect this. But you have something I don't. What? Elara panted, her hair falling into her eyes. Unpredictability. Improvisation. Vampires fight like vampires. We have styles, patterns, centuries of inherited technique. You don't have that training, which means I can't anticipate you the way I'd anticipate another immortal. Use that. Elara thought about it, breathing hard. Then she fainted left and threw her jacket at his face. Cashin caught it easily, but in that half-second of distraction, she dove low and swept at where his legs should have been. He jumped, but she'd expected that her hand shot up and actually grazed his arm before he twisted away. Better, he said, and there was approval in his voice. Much better. Now the lights went out. Not a power failure. The emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately. But the darkness was absolute, suffocating, familiar in the worst way. Cashin's hand found hers instantly, his grip cold and tight. Stay silent, he breathed against her ear. Don't move. Elara's heart hammered. She could feel him tense beside her, coiled and ready, every line of his body screaming danger. Then a voice echoed through the darkness, not from any direction, but from everywhere at once, as if the shadows themselves were speaking. Thorn, I know you're listening. It was a man's voice, cultured and cold, with an accent that sounded like money and old cruelty. Adrian Corvus, I'll admit, you surprised me last night. I didn't expect you to intercede. The girl is beneath your notice. Half-breed refuse. A genetic accident. Why protect her? A pause, heavy with implication. Unless she's more valuable than she appears. Unless you've discovered something I haven't. Cashin's hand tightened on Elara's, warning her to stay quiet. I've left you a gift, Thorn. A reminder that your wards, impressive as they are, can't stop what I can send through the spaces between. Consider it an invitation to negotiate. Bring the girl to neutral ground, the old cathedral, at midnight tomorrow, and I'll make her death quick. Refuse, and I'll make it slow enough that you'll hear her screaming from whatever hole you're hiding in. The voice faded, and the lights flickered back on. Cashin released Elara and moved immediately to a panel on the wall, his fingers flying over controls. She didn't understand. His expression was carved from ice, furious and focused. What was that? Elara's voice shook. How did he ascending? A projection carried through blood magic. He can't enter here, but he can send his voice through the barriers if he has a strong enough anchor. Cashin's jaw tightened. Which means he's placed something in or near this house. Something tied to him, the gift he mentioned. Yes, Cashin turned to her, and for the first time, she saw real worry in his eyes. Stay here. Lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. Where are you going? To find whatever he's planted and destroy it before it destroys us. He started toward the door, then stopped. Elara, I need you to understand something. Adrian doesn't make idle threats. If we don't handle this correctly, if we don't find his anchor and break it, he'll find a way through my defenses. And when he does, I know, she interrupted. I'm dead. No, Cashin's voice was fierce, absolute. No, I've survived 4 centuries by being smarter and more ruthless than my enemies. Adrian Corvus is powerful, but he's also arrogant. He just told us his plan, which means he thinks he's already won. That's his mistake. What do? We find his gift. We learn what he's really after, and we make him regret underestimating both of us. He moved to the weapons wall and selected a silver blade, checking its edge. Lock the door, Elara. I'll be back. He was gone before she could respond. Moving with that inhuman speed that still startled her, Elara stood alone in the training room, surrounded by mirrors that reflected her frightened face back at her from every angle, and tried very hard not to think about what kind of gift a vampire hunter would leave. Chapter 7. What lies? Beneath. Elara locked the door as instructed, but she couldn't stay still. She paced the training room, her mind racing through everything Adrian Corvus had said. Bring the girl to neutral ground. As if she were cargo to be traded, a problem to be solved. The casual cruelty in his voice had been worse than any overt threat. He spoke about her death the way someone might discuss the weather. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Elara pressed her ear against the door, listening. She could hear nothing from the house above. No footsteps, no voices, no sounds of struggle. Just silence, thick and oppressive. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out. The screen was still cracked from last night, but a text message glowed through the spiderweb fractures. Unknown number. He won't find it in time. It's already rooting. By dawn, your sanctuary will be mine. Alara's blood went cold. She stared at the message, then at the locked door. Cashin had told her to stay here, to stay safe. But if Adrian was telling the truth, if whatever he'd planted was already spreading through the house, she made a decision. Alara unlocked the door and slipped into the corridor beyond. The basement was a maze of passages, some leading to the archive, others to rooms she hadn't explored. She moved quietly, every sense straining, following the faint pull of something she couldn't name, instinct maybe, or the vampire blood in her veins. Recognizing danger, the temperature dropped as she descended deeper. The walls here were older, brick instead of plaster, slick with moisture. That shouldn't exist in a climate-controlled building. And there was a smell sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. She found Cashin in a sub-basement she hadn't known existed, standing before a section of wall that was moving, not collapsing, not crumbling, moving. The bricks rippled like water, and something grew through them, thick, black vines covered in thorns that glittered like obsidian. They spread across the floor, the ceiling, pulsing with a rhythm that mimicked a heartbeat. "I told you to stay in the training room," Cashin said, without turning around. His voice was strained. "He texted me. He said you wouldn't find it in time." Alara moved closer, careful not to touch the vines. "What is this?" "Bloodthorn. A parasitic plant that grows in vampire blood and shadow." He must have gotten close enough to the house to plant a seed soaked in his blood. Cashin's hands were wrapped in cloth, and Alara could see dark stains where the thorns had pierced through. "It's feeding on the wards, breaking them down from the inside. By dawn, it will have consumed enough power to create a doorway Adrian can pass through. How do we stop it?" "Fire won't work, it thrives on heat. Cutting it only makes it spread faster." He turned to face her, and she saw the frustration and calculation warring in his expression. "There's only one way to kill Bloodthorn. It has to be starved of the blood that feeds it. Adrian's blood, or mine. Since my blood powers the wards, it's consuming." Cashin looked back at the spreading vines. "If I stop feeding power to the house's defenses, the Bloodthorn will wither and die within hours. But that also means dropping every protection this place has. Adrian and his hunters could walk right through the front door." Alara's mind raced. What if we give it different blood? What if she stopped, the idea forming even as she spoke it? "What if we give it my blood?" Cashin's head snapped toward her. "Absolutely not. You said my blood is different. That it's diluted vampire blood, something in between. What if the Bloodthorn can't process it? What if it's poison to something designed to feed on pure vampire essence?" That's not how he stopped, his expression shifting as he considered it. "That's actually theoretically possible. Bloodthorn is engineered to consume vampire vitality. Your blood might confuse it, might even make it reject the connection to Adrian's blood entirely. But Alara, we don't know what it will do to you. It could drain you completely, kill you in minutes, or it could work." She stepped closer to the wall, to the pulsing vines. "Adrian expects you to either drop your wards or fight him at the cathedral. He doesn't expect me to fight back. That's his mistake, right? That's what you said. He's underestimating us." Cashin moved between her and the wall, blocking her path. "I won't let you risk your life on a theory. It's my life to risk." Alara met his eyes, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "You've been protecting me, teaching me, treating me like I have agency. So let me use it. Let me do something other than hide and wait to be saved. This isn't about proving yourself, no. It's about survival. Mine and yours." She touched his arm, feeling the cold of his skin through the cloth. "If we lose this house, where do we go? How do we plan, train, figure out how to beat Adrian? We need this sanctuary, and I can give it to us." Cashin stared at her for a long moment, and she saw a dozen emotions flicker across his face: denial, worry, frustration, and finally, reluctantly, respect. "If you do this," he said quietly, "I stay with you. The moment something goes wrong, I pull you back, and damn the consequences. Agreed?" "Agreed." He produced a small silver knife from his belt, the same one he'd been teaching her to use. "You'll need to cut deep enough to draw real blood, and you'll need to touch it directly to the root vine. There." He pointed to the thickest tendril, where it emerged from the wall. Alara took the knife, her hand trembling only slightly. She pressed the blade against her palm, hesitated for just a heartbeat, then cut. The pain was sharp and immediate. Blood welled up, dark red and to warm. She pressed her bleeding palm against the root vine before she could second-guess herself. The reaction was instant and violent. The bloodthorn screamed a sound like metal tearing, like something alive realizing it was dying. The vines convulsed, thrashing against the walls, and where Alara's blood touched them, they began to blacken and wither. The decay spread like infection, racing through the network of thorns until the entire mass was crumbling to ash, but Alara couldn't pull away. The vine had latched onto her hand, thorns burrowing into her skin. Drinking desperately even as it died, Cashin, her voice came out weak. He was there instantly. His hands wrapped around hers, pulling with strength that should have torn her arm from her body but didn't. The vine resisted, tightening, and then suddenly released as the last of its life force guttered out. Alara collapsed. Cashin caught her, lowering her carefully to the floor as the final remnants of bloodthorn crumbled into nothing. "You did it," he said, cradling her against his chest. "You killed it. The wards are holding." Alara's vision swam. Her hand throbbed where the thorns had pierced her, and she felt cold, so cold. "Is it over? For tonight? But Adrian will know his plan failed. He'll come for us himself now." Cashin lifted her easily, carrying her toward the stairs. "And we need to be ready." Chapter 8. Wounds and Whisper. Celera woke in the same bedroom as before. But this time Cashin was there. He sat in a chair beside the bed, perfectly still in the way only vampires could be, his pale eyes fixed on her bandaged hand. The curtains were drawn against what she assumed was morning light, and a fire burned low in the fireplace. She hadn't noticed the first time. "How long?" Her voice came out hoarse. 6 hours. "It's nearly noon." He didn't look away from her hand. "You lost a significant amount of blood. Not enough to require a hospital, but enough that you'll be weak for a few days." Alara pushed herself up slowly, her head swimming. Her palm throbbed beneath clean white bandages that looked professionally wrapped. "You did this?" "I've had centuries to learn basic medical care. Occupational necessity when you can't exactly walk into an emergency room." Finally, he met her eyes. "That was incredibly foolish. What you did, it worked. It could have killed you." His voice was low, controlled, but she heard the anger underneath. "You could have bled out in my arms while I watched, helpless, because vampire blood can't save humans. We can't turn the dying, can't heal mortal wounds with a bite like your stories claim. All I could have done was watch you die because you decided to play hero." "I wasn't playing." Alara's own anger sparked. "I was solving a problem. You said yourself there was no other way. I would have found one." "When?" Adrian was counting down hours, not days. "And you said it yourself, he's arrogant enough to think he's already won. The only advantage we have is doing things he doesn't expect." She held up her bandaged hand. "This was unexpected. It worked. And I'm still alive." Cashin stood abruptly and moved to the window, his back to her. The line of his shoulders was rigid, defensive. "You don't understand what it costs to watch someone die. To hold them while their heart stops, and know that all your power, all your immortality, means nothing in that moment." The pain in his voice stopped Alara's next words. She watched him stand there, silhouetted against the curtain light, and understood suddenly that this wasn't about her recklessness. This was about someone else. Someone he'd lost. "Tell me," she said quietly. "It's not tell me," firmer this time. "You know everything about me, my bloodline, my past, even my grandmother's secrets. But I don't know you. Not really. And if we're going to survive this together, I need to understand who you are. Not just what you are." Cashin was silent for so long that Alara thought he might refuse. Then he spoke, his voice distant. "Her name was Catherine. She was my sister, younger by 3 years, braver by a lifetime. When I was turned, I tried to stay away from my family. I knew what I'd become, what danger I posed. But Catherine found me anyway. She always was too clever for her own good." A pause. "She didn't care that I was a monster. She saw her brother, and she refused to let me face eternity alone." Alara pulled the blanket tighter around herself, listening. "For 5 years, she helped me learn to survive. She brought me donors, willing ones, people who needed money and didn't ask questions. She researched vampire lore, found me safe places to sleep during the day. She risked everything to keep me from becoming the thing I feared I was." His hand pressed against the window frame. "Then the House of Corvus found out about her. They'd been watching me, evaluating whether I was worth recruiting or destroying. When they discovered I had a human accomplice, a human I cared about, they made her their leverage. What did they do? They gave me a choice: join their house and serve them, or watch them kill her slowly. I chose to fight. I killed 3 of their hunters before Adrian Corvus himself intervened. Cashin's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He was younger then, newly made heir. He wanted to prove himself. So he made me watch while he drained Catherine dry, slowly, over hours. And when she died, he smiled and told me that caring about humans was a weakness that would always destroy us. Alar's chest tightened. Cashin, I killed him. Or I tried to. I nearly succeeded, got close enough to drive silver through his heart. But he was older, faster, better trained. I barely escaped with my existence. I spent the next century hunting down every member of House Corvus I could find, destroying them one by one, until they finally agreed to a truce. They'd leave me alone if I stayed out of their territory and never interfered in their business again. He turned to face her. I've honored that truce for 300 years. Until last week, when I chose you over their hunt, the weight of what he'd sacrificed settled over Alara like a shroud. You broke a 300-year truce to save me, someone you didn't even know. I made a promise to your grandmother, and I've lived long enough to know that some promises matter more than peace. He moved back to the chair, sitting down heavily. But when you pressed your hand against that bloodthorn, when I saw you willing to bleed yourself dry to save this house, all I could think about was Catherine. About watching helplessly while someone I'd sworn to protect died because I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, smart enough to save them. Alara reached out with her unbandaged hand, tentative, and touched his where it rested on the chair arm. His skin was cold, always cold, but his fingers curled around hers with a gentleness that made her throat tight. I'm not Catherine, she said. And you're not the same vampire who couldn't save her. You've had 3 centuries to become stronger, smarter. You've built this sanctuary, learned the house's weaknesses, survived when Adrian Corvus wanted you dead. You're not helpless, neither are you apparently. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Foolish, reckless, stubbornly brave, but not helpless. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. And a warning. Adrian won't underestimate you again. He'll know by now that his bloodthorn failed, that you somehow destroyed it. He'll be curious, which makes you even more dangerous in his eyes. Alara squeezed his hand. Good. Let him be curious. Let him wonder what else I'm capable of. Because I'm done being afraid. Cashin studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. You mean that? I do. I've spent 6 months running from my past, hiding from who I am, trying to make myself small and invisible. It didn't work. Adrian found me anyway. So if I'm going to die, I'd rather die fighting than cowering. She paused. And I'd rather do it with someone who understands what it means to lose everything and keep going anyway. For a long moment, they sat there in the firelit room, hands clasped. 2 people who'd been shaped by loss and were learning, slowly, what it meant to trust again. Then Cashin's phone buzzed. He released her hand and checked it, his expression darkening. What is it? Alara asked. A message from the House of Thorn. My people. He looked up, and his eyes were ice again. Adrian has requested a formal parley. He wants to meet, tonight, the cathedral. Like he said. No, somewhere more public, more dangerous. Cashin's jaw tightened. He wants to meet at the night market. Chapter 9. The night market. The night market existed in the spaces between worlds. Cashin explained it to Alara as they prepared to leave. His hand steady as he helped her into a coat that was too fine to be hers, dark velvet lined with silk, smelling of cedar and protection spells he'd woven into the fabric. It's neutral ground, he said, fastening the buttons with careful precision. A place where all the houses can meet without fear of ambush. There are rules older than any vampire alive, enforced by magic and mutual necessity. No violence, no compulsion, no feeding without explicit consent. Break them, and you forfeit not just your life, but your house's standing. So Adrian can't hurt me there. He can't physically harm you. But words can be weapons, Alara, and he's had centuries to sharpen his. Cashin stepped back, examining her. The market exists in multiple places simultaneously: warehouses, underground stations, abandoned buildings. It shifts location, but those who need to find it always can. Tonight, it will appear beneath the old subway terminal on 5th and Archer. Alara touched the coat, feeling the faint hum of power woven through it. Why does he want to meet? What's the point if he can't attack? Because Adrian doesn't just want you dead anymore. He wants to understand what you are, what you did to his bloodthorn. And he wants to evaluate me to see if breaking our truce was worth whatever I gained by protecting you. Cashin's expression was grim. He's hunting for leverage, for weakness. We need to give him neither. They left as dusk settled over the city, moving through streets that seemed to part for Cashin like water. Elara stayed close, hyper-aware of every shadow, every passerby who might be more than human. Her bandaged hand throbbed beneath her glove, a constant reminder of what she'd survived and what she'd risked. The old subway terminal was a relic from the city's industrial past, a grand entrance sealed decades ago. Its Art Deco details weathered, but still beautiful. Cashin led her down a service alley to a door that shouldn't have existed, marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Stay close to me, he said. Don't accept anything offered by anyone except me. Don't make deals, promises, or agreements. Vampires take words very seriously. And don't show fear. They can smell it, and they will use it. Comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to keep you alive. He touched the door, and it swung open silently. The night market sprawled before them like a fever dream. The space was impossibly vast, stretching beyond where the terminal's walls should have ended. Stalls and booths lined pathways lit by floating orbs of pale light, selling things Elara couldn't name, bottles of liquid that glowed like captured stars, jewelry that whispered in languages older than Latin, books bound in materials she didn't want to identify. The air smelled of incense and iron and something wild, and everywhere. Vampires. They moved through the market like beautiful predators, dressed in everything from modern couture to period clothing centuries out of date. Some were pale as death, others had skin like polished mahogany or burnished gold. Their eyes tracked Elara as she passed, curious, hungry, calculating. More than one smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. Cashin Thorne, a woman, appeared beside them, materializing from shadow. She was stunning, with dark skin and eyes like molten amber, dressed in a gown that seemed to shift colors with each movement. I heard rumors you'd broken your exile. I didn't believe them until now. Lydia. Cashin's tone was cordial but cool. I wasn't aware I was in exile. Self-imposed, perhaps. You've avoided the market for decades. Her gaze slid to Elara, assessing. And this is the human everyone's whispering about? The one who killed Adrian's bloodthorn. This is Elara Ashford. She's under my protection. How delightful. Lydia's smile was sharp. Adrian is holding court in the East Gallery. He's been telling everyone who'll listen that you've gone soft, that you're harboring a half-breed abomination out of misplaced sentiment. I thought you'd want to know what story he's spinning. Thank you for the warning. Oh, it's not a warning. It's gossip. Much more fun. Lydia drifted away, her laughter trailing behind her like perfume. Cashin guided Elara through the market, past stalls selling memories in crystal vials and dreams trapped in amber. She saw vampires feeding in alcoves, humans with dreamy expressions offering their wrists, their throats, while the immortals drank with careful reverence. Consent, she realized, just as Cashin had described. Nothing forced, nothing violent. The East Gallery was a raised platform surrounded by columns that looked like they'd been stolen from a cathedral. Adrian Corvus held court there, surrounded by other vampires who wore the crimson and black of his house. He was younger looking than Elara had expected, mid-20s in appearance, with aristocratic features and dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. Beautiful and terrible, like a marble statue given breath and malice. His eyes found hers across the crowd, and his smile was a blade wrapped in silk. Thorne, Adrian's voice carried effortlessly. How kind of you to accept my invitation. And you've brought her. The little problem that refuses to die. Cashin's hand found the small of Elara's back, steadying, protective. They climbed the steps to the gallery, and Elara felt dozens of eyes tracking their movement. Adrian, Cashin's tone was neutral. You requested a parley. Here we are. Indeed. I wanted to see her for myself, to understand what could possibly be worth breaking a 300-year truce. Adrian descended from his seat, moving with liquid grace until he stood before them. He was taller than Cashin, broader, radiating power that made the air feel thick. She doesn't look like much. Human, fragile, mortal. Looks can be deceiving, Elara said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Adrian's eyebrows rose. It speaks. How charming. He circled them slowly, a predator evaluating prey. Tell me, little half-breed, what did you do to my bloodthorn? That magic should have been impervious to human interference. Yet somehow, You destroyed it with a touch. I bled on it. Yes, I deduced that much from the residue. But human blood shouldn't have that effect. Which means you're not entirely human, are you? He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his dark eyes. You're an impossibility. A violation of natural law. Your very existence is an insult to everything we've built. Then why not just kill me and be done with it? Elara met his gaze, refusing to look away. Because now I'm curious. Adrian tilted his head. Killing you would be easy. But understanding you? Learning what your bloodline is truly capable of. That's far more valuable. So I'm making you an offer, Elara Ashford. Cashin tends beside her. Adrian silence Thorn. This is between me and the girl. Adrian's smile widened. Join my house. Submit to our examination, our tests, our study. Help us understand what you are, how you were made, what your blood can do. In exchange, I'll call off the hunt. I'll guarantee your safety, your comfort, your life for as long as you remain useful. And when I stop being useful, then we'll discuss other arrangements. His expression was pleasant, reasonable. Or you can refuse, stay under Thorn's failing protection, and watch everyone you've ever cared about die slowly while I hunt you across decades. Your choice. The market had gone silent. Every vampire within earshot was watching, waiting to see what the impossible human would do. Elara felt Cashin's hand press against her back, not controlling, not deciding for her, but offering support for whatever choice she made. She thought of her grandmother, who'd spent her life hiding. Of Catherine, who'd died because she'd loved her brother. Of everyone who'd ever been forced to choose between survival and dignity. No, Elara said clearly. I refuse. Adrian's smile didn't falter, but something cold flickered in his eyes. How disappointing. I had hoped you'd be smarter than that. I'm smart enough to know that nothing you offer comes without chains. Elara stepped forward, closer to the vampire who'd hunted her, threatened her, tried to kill her. You want to study me? Understand me? Here's what you need to know. I'm not a problem to be solved or a specimen to be examined. I'm a person. And I'd rather die free than live as your prisoner. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Adrian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Fascinating. Truly fascinating. Very well, Miss Ashford. You've made your choice. Now we'll see how long you can live with it. He turned away, dismissing them, and the market exhaled. Cashin guided Elara back through the crowd, his grip firm but gentle. They didn't speak until they'd left the market behind, climbing back into the cold night air of the real world. That, Cashin said quietly, was either the bravest or most foolish thing you've ever done. Both. Probably. Elara's hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. Did I just make everything worse? No, Cashin stopped, turning to face her in the empty alley. You drew a line. You showed everyone there that you can't be intimidated or bought. That's power, Elara. Real power. And it's the only kind that matters when facing someone like Adrian Corvus. So what happens now? Now? Cashin's expression was grim. Now he stops playing games and comes for us with everything he has. Chapter 10. The Shoisith attack came 3 nights later. At the hour when darkness was deepest and dawn still felt impossibly far away, Elara woke to the sound of breaking glass, not the windows, which were warded, but something deeper in the house. Something that cracked like ice splintering under pressure. She was on her feet instantly, grabbing the silver knife Cashin had given her, her heart already racing. The door to her room flew open. Cashin stood there, fully dressed, despite the hour, his face carved from winter stone. They're here. Adrian brought his entire house, 20 vampires, maybe more. The wards are failing. I thought you said they couldn't get through, they can't break them by force. But they've been working on them for 3 days, wearing them down, finding the weakest points. He moved into the room, urgent, but controlled. We have 2 options. We fight, or we run. If we fight, we might win, but you'll likely die in the process. If we run, we abandon everything I've built here, and they'll hunt us across the country until they corner us somewhere less defensible. Elara's mind raced. There has to be a third option. There isn't. Yes, there is. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. What if I make a deal? Not with Adrian, with the other houses. You said the market had rules, that there were laws even Adrian has to follow. What if we expose what he's doing? That he's attacking neutral territory, that he's violating the truce you made centuries ago? Wouldn't that make other houses intervene? Cashin stared at her. You want to invoke house law against him, to force a trial. Can we do that? Technically, yes. But it would require proof, witnesses, and a formal accusation before the Council of Houses. That takes time. We don't have. Adrian will kill us both long before. Another crash echoed through the house, closer this time. The lights flickered. Then we make time. Alara's voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. You're one of the oldest vampires in this city. You have allies, don't you? People who'd vouch for you, who'd stand witness. Some, but asking them to stand against House Corvus is exactly what we need to do. She squeezed his arm. Cassian, you've been fighting Adrian alone for 300 years. Maybe it's time to stop fighting alone. Maybe it's time to let other people help. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, the old grief giving way to something newer, more fragile. Hope. There's one person, he said slowly. Lydia, the vampire from the market. She's old, powerful, and she hates Adrian almost as much as I do. If I can convince her to witness, to bring her house into this, then do it. Now. Cassian pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. The house shuddered around them, and Alara heard voices downstairs, cold, elegant voices speaking in languages she didn't understand. Lydia, Cassian said into the phone. I need you to come to my home, now. I'm invoking old debts, old promises. Adrian Corvus is attacking in violation of our truce, and I need a witness from a neutral house before he slaughters us both. A pause. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, I know what I'm asking. Lydia, please. He hung up and looked at Alara. She's coming. 10 minutes, maybe less. We just need to survive until then. Then let's survive. They moved together through the house. Cassian leading with supernatural speed, while Alara stayed close behind, knife clutched in her bandaged hand. The first floor was in chaos, furniture overturned, walls cracked where something had hit them with force. And standing in the entrance hall, surrounded by vampires in crimson and black, was Adrian Corvus. He looked different than he had at the market. Less controlled, more feral. His eyes blazed with something beyond hunger, obsession, maybe, or fury at being defied. Thorn, Adrian's smile was all teeth. You've made this so much harder than it needed to be. If you'd just given me the girl 3 nights ago, I would have made it quick. But now, he gestured, and his vampires spread out, surrounding them. Now I'm going to make you watch while I take her apart piece by piece, studying every drop of her impossible blood until I understand exactly what she is. You're in violation of our truce, Cassian said, his voice carrying through the hall. You swore 300 years ago to leave me and mine alone. She is mine to protect, which makes this attack an act of war against House Thorn. Your house is nothing. A single vampire playing at lordship, hiding in his books and his isolation. You have no allies, no army, no power beyond these crumbling wards. Adrian took a step forward. And your truce? I declare it void. You broke it first when you interfered with my hunt. Everything that follows is merely consequence. Then let's discuss consequences. A new voice rang out, female. Amused, dangerous, Lydia materialized in the doorway behind Adrian. And she wasn't alone. 5 other vampires stood with her, all wearing the silver and midnight blue of House Nightingale. They moved into the hall with predatory grace. And suddenly Adrian's 20 vampires didn't seem like quite enough. Lydia, Adrian's voice was tight. This doesn't concern your house, doesn't it? You're attacking another house lord in his own sanctuary, violating truces and protocols that have kept our world stable for centuries. That concerns every house. She moved to stand beside Cassian, her amber eyes glittering. I'm here as a neutral witness. And what I'm witnessing is House Corvus acting like rabid dogs instead of civilized immortals. Adrian's face darkened. You have no authority. I have the authority of house law, which you're currently breaking. Lydia pulled out her phone. I'm also currently recording this for the council. Would you like to continue threatening murder on camera, or would you prefer to retreat and let the proper channels handle this dispute? The silence that followed was electric with tension. Alara watched Adrian's face cycle through emotions: rage, calculation, frustration. He was trapped, and he knew it. If he attacked now, with Lydia witnessing, he'd be declaring war on House Nightingale as well as House Thorn. Even his power had limits. This isn't over, Adrian said, finally, his voice poison sweet. The council will hear my case. They'll see that this human abomination violates natural law, that her existence threatens everything we are. And when they rule in my favor, and they will all come for her again, legally, officially, with the full weight of vampire law behind me, then we'll see you at the trial. Cashin said. Adrian's vampires withdrew like a receding tide, their master's fury rolling off them in waves. When they were gone, when the house was empty except for Cashin, Alara, and House Nightingale, the tension finally broke. Alara's legs gave out. Cashin caught her, lowering her gently to sit on the stairs. You're insane, Lydia said, but there was admiration in her voice. Provoking Adrian Corvus into a public trial. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Yes, Cashin said, but it's also our only chance. If the council rules against us, at least Alara will have a voice before the end. A chance to be seen as a person instead of a problem. Lydia studied them both, then smiled slowly. You care about her. Actually care. I didn't think you were still capable of that after Catherine. Neither did I. Alara looked up at Cashin. At the vampire who'd risked everything to protect her. Who'd broken 3 centuries of careful isolation because of a promise to a dying woman and a growing certainty that some people were worth fighting for. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we prepare for the trial. We gather evidence, allies, arguments. We build a case that proves your right to exist supersedes their desire to maintain their precious purity. Cashin knelt beside her, his cold hand covering hers. And we hope that after centuries of darkness, the vampire world is finally ready to see a little light. Alara thought about everything that had led to this moment, the letters, the fear, the running, the choice to stop hiding and start fighting, the slow, impossible trust growing between her and a creature who shouldn't care, but did. Then let's give them something to see, she said. Outside, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight touched the broken windows, and in that golden light, Alara saw not an ending, but a beginning frightening and uncertain and absolutely worth fighting for.